Hello, I'm Joseph. You can hear from my voice, I'm doing a bit better. I'm still having to take quite a few breaks. Yesterday I did like 3 hours and it was way too much. I pushed myself too hard. I was doing a stream, but it was just a dumb idea. And so I got a really bad headache afterwards and I just lay down for literally the entire day. Woke up today, I did like an hour, took a break, did about 30 more minutes, and here I'm making the video now. I'm gonna stop for the rest of the day because I am starting to get another headache, and I just don't want to keep pushing myself to where I'm going down the entire day and I can't do anything else. So this week will be a bit slower week, but hopefully I'll be able to get the last bits I need to get the final hurdle to me consider like Android good enough so that I can move on to Linux support. I'm going to talk about a lot of little nitty gritty stuff for Android that I was running into, some of the hurdles that I've been going over. So first, but let me just show you kind of what I have here. So this is Android Studio. It's in dark mode, obviously. I am able to control my phone physically. So this is my phone, my actual phone I have aside of me, but I'm able to mirror that screen into Android Studio, which is really cool. I can rotate it if I need to. This is not the actual rotation of the device. If I rotate my device, well, it's not going to rotate it because I'm looking at the home screen, but I'll show you that when I run it. And because I was having so many issues, I actually implemented both OpenGL ES and Vulkan. Now, I will say Vulkan is extremely slow, and I'm not quite sure why, but I'm assuming it's because all these phones that implement Vulkan actually do not have native Vulkan support. Rather, it's an emulation layer. So I'm going to show you Vulkan first. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to debug. I do not have release versions of this because I haven't set up the certificate for releases, but you can see that it disabled the OpenGL ES and now uses Vulkan. The way I did that was actually in my build Gradle file, I set up product flavors, and then I give one for OpenGL, which is actually OpenGL ES and Vulkan. So pretty straightforward on that. And then all I do is swap with my build variants with that, and it obviously lets me do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking, run this real quick, and you can kind of see this is all C++ code. So this is not the PHP runtime with the Phrost stuff, but this is just like the bare minimum to get it to run. You see it running there. I can actually rotate my phone, and it'll rotate it. Well, maybe not. Let's see what, I'm not sure what's going on there. So that's only Vulkan that's having that issue. So if I go ahead and stop this and switch over to OpenGL ES debug and run this as well, you notice that it's going to be insanely faster. It's going to do things a lot faster for whatever reason. So there you go. It's flying around now, and I can actually rotate my device, and it's actually rotating all this weird effects because I was rotating it. But it's very blurry, and even if I try to zoom in because of it's doing some, like you can't even see the frame rate that it's going at. So I'm going to stop that for now. But yeah, so I have a fairly good workflow now for Android. This is mostly plug and play once I get my Phrost stuff embedded, because the first thing I needed to do was get BGFX to be compiled for Android, and you cannot cross compile for Android on a Mac computer. I then booted up Parallels and installed Linux on ARM. You cannot run Android Studio for Linux on ARM. So then I went to my Windows machine to find out you also can't cross compile BGFX for Android on Windows. So then I went to my Linux box, my Linux laptop, and I was working off of that for a while, but it was really slow to get these builds to come out. And so what I did was I just built it once, and then on my core project here, I went ahead and made these individual libs folder of BGFX for debug and for release. And then I wasn't going to do every single variant because I'm only going to support ARM64 at this point for Android. So I have that for both SDL and SDL, or BGFX and SDL image. Another complication that I ran into was getting SDL compiled in my Android project was another problem, mainly because they have older Android files, build files. So my Android project is CMake, but all their build files are these Android make files. This is now deprecated. It's no longer really like supported in Android, but you can still use these older make files. And so what I did was I took these make files and made my own variants of them in CMake. So here's the STL image and the STL variants. And then I would build these and copy over the SO files so then I don't have to keep cross compiling them, and I can have this in a way that works. So this way you can open up the Android project and not have to build out SDL, STL image, or BGFX or anything else like that. You literally just need to open the Android file, set up your assets folder, and build it, and you're good to go. You don't have to do all this weird cross compiling crap that that you would need. So that's that. But yeah, it was a big pain in the ass to get all this stuff to work in CMake. And then the next issue I ran into was getting the communication between the Java code or Java activity to C++ because I need to load in my shaders, I need to load in the image. Um, and the first kind of big issue I ran into was I couldn't seem to load in the shader from Java to C++. So what I was trying to do first was I was using the res folder, and then I put everything in raw. This is a standard Android practice. Normally chuck it into there, and I was trying to pass over a file descriptor, which is just like a little handle that you pass into from Java to C++, and then you use C++ to read it in. This way, I'm not having to read it in from Java, copy the bytes over, and then read it into C++ again, like copy it again. So you're not having that double duty. I still want that to work, but it definitely did not pan out that way because I ended up moving it to assets because it would compress, it would have kept compressing my files, and I could, if you have a compressed file on your Android APK file, you can't read it in as a file descriptor in C++. Even though I was trying to chuck in a no compress for my .bin files, so if you named it as a .png, it wouldn't compress it, and you can technically read it in then. But if I wanted to not have to have you guys rename these shader files to .pngs or something, um, this should have worked. It's not working. So I moved it to assets, and I was having an issue with assets as well. It was no longer compressing it, but the way that you read it in from assets from C++ was that you would get the offset of the file, and I guess it's like it's still a not a compressed file, but like an archived file where it has all these files in one file, and then you read the offset of the bytes based off the file position of it. Um, and it just was not working. I can probably go back to that now that I figured out what the core issue was. But then I was like, you know what? There's something wrong because it was telling me that my vertex shader input wasn't matching my fragment shader input, or my output wasn't matching my input. So I was assuming that actually my reading process from my Java code to my C++ code, and I'll show you that right now. Do 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 do. So if I go down here, I go to this here. Um, I was assuming that this code that I have here, which is the way that I pull in the Java activity, I call in read assets, it brings me back the bytes, and I go ahead and read it in. I was assuming that all this was working, and it actually wasn't. So I actually went as far as to implement both Vulkan and Android OpenGL because of that, just to make sure it wasn't something I was doing on my end to not get it to work. And then after I found out on Windows that the Vulkan support worked fine, so now I implemented both DirectX and Vulkan on Windows. Um, I went to a website called Shadered. So let me bring that up real quick. So Shadered, and they have a light version, which is OpenGL ES 3.0 as a web. So there's WebGL 2 for the browser, which is actually OpenGL ES 3 for embedded devices like Android and iOS. So yeah, I copied over the code that was cross-compiled from the BGFX shaders into here, and it worked fine. So after all that, I was like, okay, there's definitely nothing wrong with the shaders. I got it to work on Windows with Vulkan. I got it to work on a browser with the shadered thing, and so I just went in and embedded the bytes directly into to C code, C++ code, and read it from there, and it worked. So then I was like, okay, if there's something wrong that I'm doing, I went back to my Java code, and as you can see, it's really small in terms of what I'm doing here. If I go to it, it's Java code. Yes, it is. Why am I not seeing where? Okay, here. Like I'm just literally doing something that's so simple as to get the assets, read the bytes into a buffer, pass over the buffer, and I still print it out. Um, and the issue that I had in my C++ code was just really stupid. It's always a stupid issue that leads you to like just have this go into really long process to where it doesn't work. But basically, I wasn't copying over the data or the bytes into my buffer. I was just setting it to it, which means that as soon as I released it, it wasn't there anymore. uh, so yeah, it was just like a really dumb thing. So I just had to do a mem copy onto there, copy it over. So now there's that obvious overlay thing where I'm taking um, Java data, passing it to C++, copying it, even though I should technically be reading it directly into it. This is something I'll probably revisit later this week, but I at least needed to get it to work. And so that is now working there. And so I do have Vulkan, I do have OpenGLES for Android out of the box that I can pull into my project. And I have Vulkan support for Windows now because of this. But all of this is, just setting the groundwork because I still need to get SDL audio to be pulled in. I still need to get Box 2D to be pulled in, um, and some other other miscellaneous things here. But beyond that, it's just this week I'll just focus on getting PHP to be cross-compiled for Linux or for Android, and then get the whole Phrost engine in here with a much more minimal app.c++ file rather than the whole everything that you see here around by kind of piece coding in some of the Phrost code that I have into the Android application. And that's it. I know it's got a lot of boring crap to listen to, but it's kind of, I don't know, if anyone interested in building like native Android apps with this stuff, that might be helpful to know some of the complications I ran into for that. And yeah, hopefully this week will pan out to be fruitful and I won't get stuck on another stupid issue where I'm not copying the bytes as I should and not have to spend all this extra time simplifying, re-replicating it in a much different application moving forward.